Your 2023 NBA G League champs, the Delaware Blue Coats.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Blue Coats Beat, the interview series where we bring different personalities on this show, whether they are affiliated with our team or affiliated with the national audience, to just give us a different perspective of the game of basketball. And today, I'm very, very lucky to have Cierra Clark at Cierra Clark TV on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. She is a sports anchor reporter for THV 11 in Little Rock, Arkansas. And the best thing about Cierra is not only is the weekend sports anchor and multi-skilled journalist, but she has covered Ricky Councils. That's what we're going to get into right away. But right after school, she started covering high school sports and the Florida Gators, and she continues to excel in her coverage of great SEC, bringing us the stories behind the sports. Cierra, thank you so much for joining us on the beat.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, your accolades speak for yourself. I love how, you have come up, obviously, covering high school sports. I saw you're still doing it. You did it this weekend, which is great. I have to ask you real fast. It's such a great feeling when you watch these young kids play, isn't it?
Yes, especially at the state championships, the emotion that goes into it. They're so excited. It also stinks on the other end when the team loses, because then they're just like crying and so distraught. I just feel so bad. But yes, these kids, they really get into it for sure.
Yeah, it's, when you get to the pro level, sometimes, some of the desire is missed a little bit, obviously. It's just natural. But when you see these young kids who are driven, it is really, really a cool thing. And, for those who don't know, speaking of young, you've covered Ricky Council as a Razorback. And, I did a whole spotlight series on Ricky coming out of Arkansas, and you watched him grow in a very short period of time. But that being said, this is a kid who's gone up and down from the G League to the main roster. And when he went to the main roster, he looked really, really good. But what did you notice about his game kind of when you first saw him play?
Well, when he came to Arkansas, he came from Wichita State. And so not a ton of people really knew about him, but everyone really trusted Eric Musselman, head coach. He's known as the importer, getting great players out of that transfer portal. And so Ricky ended up being one of them. And at Arkansas, his brief time there, he was just a very powerful player, it seemed. He was very strong. You could tell he spent a lot of time in the weight room and in strength training. And just the way he could get up at the rim and go back and forth, had a lot of great endurance and everything. So he was just a real powerful player.
Yeah, it's funny you say in the weight room, because that's kind of like the first thing I noticed about Ricky was, some athletes come out of school and it's right away they're like, oh, you need to hit the gym, you need to hit the weight room. But he was already chiseled. He was already, you could tell he had that strength to be able to play down low, up top, make his own shot. Now, there was a lot of noise pertaining to Ricky entering the draft in regards to his overall skill set and how it would translate to the NBA game. I mean, I think he was like 27% from beyond the arc. It was something he had to work on. There were some kind of, drawbacks saying maybe he doesn't play both ends of the court as well as some others. But as a player who at one time was projected to be drafted somewhere in the first round, were you surprised he actually went undrafted?
At Arkansas, he played really well, but it wasn't a super shock that he went undrafted simply because, he was only at Arkansas for that brief period of time. He was an impactful player for sure, but I think if maybe he would have had a little bit more time playing at that higher level and gotten that little bit more exposure, possibly maybe he could have ended up higher in the draft.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, maybe a little more exposure would have helped. I mean, it seemed like the one good thing from my perspective is with Ricky, it kind of made him driven to even be better. And I don't know if you saw when he first came up. I mean, number one, he took the G League by storm right away. I mean, everybody in the Delaware Blue Coats are like, wow, this kid is special. And he continued to work. He continued to grind. And his first opportunity on the Sixers up on the pro roster, I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but he definitely did not disappoint. He showed that he belongs in that NBA game.
Yeah. And I think that type of mentality and that type of, started from the bottom, like how Drake says, mentality can really take a player far, no matter really what the experts say and everyone else says. It just matters how hard they're willing to work and how much time they're willing to put into their craft to excel at that next level.
Yeah, and you know what? Mindset is so huge, especially when you're a two-way NBA player, right? You sign these 10-day contracts, you sign the two-way contracts. I mean, one day you're up at the pro league, the next day you're back at the G League, then you're back at the pros. It is tough. And, one thing I will say is he's handled it very, very well. And I think, just, more things to come from Ricky. And, as a sports reporter yourself, we talked about this earlier. You spent some time covering the high school sports scene as well. You're still covering it on your own time too. And seeing as you're a former athlete as well, can you kind of touch on the landscape, on how it's changed since your days in the program when we talk about high school and collegiate sports?
Yeah, social media has had a huge impact on sports now. It seems like every kid has their kind of huddle profile in their link bio or whatever. And even now, kids are they're having commitment ceremonies. So instead of like National Signing Day, which they still have, they'll have like a big party for signing day. They'll say, hey, I'm making my commitment at this time, show up. So it's not like they're actually signing the pen to paper. We're making a commitment. So there's a lot more eyes on things now, which is definitely different now. And of course, kids have NIL on their mind, the top players. That's changed the game completely. And in some states, it's going to the high school level. So it's changed a lot for sure.
Yeah, I mean, great topics right there where you talk about, number one, the huddle report, number two, the signing, but you see that all the time. And then the NIL has just changed the landscape. Not to put you on a spot, but I actually am a big proponent of it. And I think that, as long as it has barriers and, and it has limitations, I think it's very important, because I don't think people understand the amount of commitment that these players do. And I'll give you an example, and I'm sure you could touch on this. One of my close personal friends, his son plays Division II baseball, and he told me, hey, Tony, I went to a tournament to see DJ in North Carolina, and he played 8 games. I flew out there Thursday night. I was there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I came home Monday morning. He's like, ask me how many minutes I spent with DJ. I said, how many? He said, 8. I said, 8 minutes? He's like, yeah. He's like, he was literally like in the weight room, practicing 3 games, meals, preparation, bedtime. Like, it is absolutely crazy, the commitment that these kids have to make.
Absolutely. And you mentioned at the Division II level, you really have to love the sport, especially if you're not, don't get me wrong, if you play at the collegiate level, I would hope that you would like your sport. But at the mid-major level and at the D2 level, you have to really love it, because you're not getting all the recognition that players in those mid-majors or rather Power 5 schools are getting.
That's so true. Yeah, I mean, you do. The grind is real. It really is. It definitely shows your love of the game. That's why I question a lot of people when they say, he doesn't really love the game. I'm like, listen, you may say that when he's been in the NBA for 5 years or Major League Baseball, but when these kids are in high school grinding, no matter what division they're in, and in college, they have to love it, because if they don't love it, they got to work 7 days a week, right? I mean, it doesn't stop for them.
Right. They'll pick something else to do if they really don't love it.
Exactly. Speaking of love, I mean, we all love the NCAA basketball time. Obviously, this is March Madness time, and seeing as you always are deep into college basketball scene with the lineage of the Razorbacks, going back to that Nolan Richardson years. I was a huge Razorbacks fan. The women's championship brackets have led the NCAA storylines. Stephen A. had a great quote where he said, if you ask me 5 male basketball players in college, I don't know if I can name them, but if you ask me 5 women, I'm naming them right off the bat. I mean, are you think we're finally, I say finally because I love it, but are you finally starting to see the shift, that we've finally all been waiting for?
I think we're getting there for sure. And it's important to have those name brand players. And maybe that is why also NIL is beneficial in this case for the women's team. I mean, Angel Reese was in Cardi B's music video, and that would have never, if you would have told me that 5-6 years ago, I'd been like, what are you talking about? And, seeing that, and Cardi B in the song, she has a line that says, I'm balling like I went to LSU. Like, that would have, Cardi's from the Bronx. Like, what does she have to do with LSU?
I love it.
Yeah, so those players are making their way into mainstream. Even blase at LSU. She's a rapper and she's able to make money off of that. And so it's so interesting how women's basketball has really transcended into pop culture for college hoops. And that, like Stephen A. said, I couldn't think of a men's player that was that important to do that. I mean, the men usually they're just focused on the NBA, one and done. They're out of there. As for the women's, they're not. It's not really that case, and it's just really cool to see, these women basketball players everywhere.
Yeah, you made a great point. I didn't even know about the Cardi B experiment with Freeze. I had no idea. That just shows you, like you said, how much it's grown. I mean, you saw Travis Scott there, to watch Caitlin Clark break the record in Iowa. They're getting the national coverage. They really are, which I think is huge. I mean, and listen, we saw some things happen with the LSU at South Carolina the other night, and I will say, again, I'm from Philly, so, Temple May, Dawn Staley, I love the way she came out and she professionally said, look, this isn't who we are. Don't judge us by this, but this is a heated game. Like just because we're women doesn't mean we don't come to battle. And I think that's I coached softball for 15 years and those girls came to battle. It didn't matter, girls, guys. This is still a competition. It's still competitive. So what did you think of that game and how it played out and everything that was surrounding it?
Yeah. Dawn Staley, also, I'm a huge fan. She is a class act. And obviously, there's no room for violence in any sport. But yeah, these women get passionate about their sport. And it seems like, there could be a big time rivalry starting with South Carolina LSU, because that game, I mean, it was on the Mothership channel and everybody was tuned into that one. And it's definitely going to be fun to see how they play out in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. I mean, you heard the press conference said, listen, we're going to see them again and we're going to be ready. So that's going to be get your popcorn ready for that game when that happens. Now, I have to ask you this because I make some statements on specific shows that I'm on and I'm really passionate about some of the things I talk about, and watching Caitlin Clark evolve, over these last couple of years and just watching what she's done, not just for herself, but, just for the game. And, I think she gets a lot of hate, in my opinion, from certain people. And a lot of people gave her a lot of hate with the whole Kobe Bryant poses with the pictures and, with the trophy, which I think was way overblown. But speaking about the impact of the game, I talked about this, that, the great Kobe Bryant had such an impact on the game in the NBA that we're even now, years later, we're just finding out, how special and how great he was with that Mamba mentality for the game. But I honestly think that we're seeing the same thing with Caitlin Clark. Obviously, nobody's ever going to be on that Kobe level, but you talked about pop culture earlier, and I live in the city of AI, and AI was one of those cats that brought that pop culture to mainstream, the cornrows, the rap music, the baggy pants, the tattoos. And I think Caitlin Clark, just from a woman's perspective, to say, hey, if you could shoot, you could shoot. Male, female, doesn't matter. You could ball. I think that she's having that same impact on the game already.
Yeah, seeing her at All-Star Week, that was really groundbreaking to just see her be like, yeah, I can play with the boys. I don't care. And not only it makes an impact on basketball, but it also kind of transforms off the court as well for women, especially like myself. I'm in a male-dominated field, and it shows that, yeah, I can do anything that a guy can do, and Caitlin Clark is doing the same thing. And so I think that is just real. That was just really symbolic for her to do that. And Kobe was a huge advocate for women's basketball and with his daughter. And I think he would be really proud to see Caitlin Clark and all these other incredible women kind of carrying on that legacy that he had.
I love that you said that, because it's so true. People forget about that, man. His daughter, they were his best friends, man. And I say that as a girl dad. My daughter's going to be 24, and I saw some of the challenges coming up. And, listen, they don't get uniforms, but the boys teams get uniforms. They can't get practice time. They have to practice at 6 a.m. because the boys get it from 3 to 7. Like, there's a lot of different avenues that people aren't looking at. And you're right, Caitlin Clark off the court has been so symbolic in that feature. Now, let me end on this because it is March Madness time. Just kind of like so people understand who Cierra Clark is and what you have to do as a sports reporter. You know, it's March Madness time, which is crazy. You're in the SEC. You're in that Razorback country. What's the life of a sports reporter like when all these stories right now and this time are so plentiful?
Well, this year is a bit of an outlier because the Hogs are not very good. They're playing on day one of the SEC tournament against Vanderbilt. No one really, I think, expects them to. The Hogs would literally have to win out and get the SEC title to go to the championship. That's how terrible this season has been. And so I don't think anybody's really expecting them to do that. They're kind of just Hog fans. It's been a rough football season. This is how it goes in Arkansas. So it's like if it's a bad football season, no, we're excited for basketball. Bad basketball season, which we haven't had in a while since I've been here. I moved here in 2021. Then it's like, oh, bad basketball season. Oh, okay, I guess we're ready for baseball. And then baseball, you know, they're very good as well. But last year did not have a good year. They didn't make it to Omaha, which is always the expectation. And so it's like, all right, we're ready for football again. So it's a vicious, constant cycle for Razorback fans. But normally during this time of year, we're kind of planning out to see, okay, which games are we traveling to? Because it does get costly. And it depends kind of where the Hogs are sent to go. And what's interesting is we can't shoot any video of the game because of NCAA regulations. So we will go live. We'll try to find special storylines. Like last year, we went to Las Vegas and for the Sweet 16 where the Hogs fell to UConn. And I did a story with Eric Musselman's wife and how supportive she is of the team and all that kind of thing. So just trying to find those unique storylines. There was also like a man who like owned a barbecue store or shop in Vegas that was from Arkansas, I think, or he had an Arkansas tie. And so one of my coworkers did a story of that. So just trying to find those unique storylines. This year, so we're not going to the SEC tournament because, I mean, it's just people don't really care as much right now for the Hogs. But actually in Arkansas, so for a while, for years and years, I think up until 2020, the Razorbacks were not allowed to compete against other in-state schools. Like granted, like in sports, like swimming, track and field, where it's like an entire meet, that's a little bit different. But for like those sports where you go head to head, the Hogs were not allowed to play against UA Little Rock, University of Central Arkansas, Arkansas State, University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, all those other Division I schools. They were not allowed to compete against them because the former athletic director, it was a whole kind of like, what's the point of playing them? Because if they win, it's huge for them. But if we lose, then it's kind of like, oh, we have everything to lose because we lost at this school. But that's changed now, especially with Yurchuk as the athletic director now. And the Hogs play those other teams now. And in 2025, they're opening up this season against Arkansas State, which is huge because that's a FBS school, the only other FBS school in the state. And so mostly here in Arkansas, everybody's a Razorback fan for the most part. Like some people at Arkansas State are a little like kind of like towards Arkansas, but a lot of them are both Hog fans and Red Wolf fans. But so this last night was the Sun Belt championship game for men's basketball, and Arkansas State made it to the championship game for the first time in like over 15 years. And they have a first-year head coach in Brian Hodgson. He was a Nate Oates assistant in Alabama. And so he's had a phenomenal first year. And so they made it to the Sun Belt championship game. They did lose. But still, it was like we were kind of waiting for that. Like, oh, well, if A-State wins, then we might be covering A-State in the tournament. And then UA Little Rock, they were in the Ohio Valley championship game against Murray State, and they lost that one. So it was kind of like almost there. So there's other teams in Arkansas doing well, but what's interesting now about transfer portal and NIL is that those other programs that I just mentioned, they have players that used to play at Arkansas and maybe weren't getting the playing time they wanted or had other reasons to transfer. And they transferred to those other schools and have done quite well. So it's really interesting to see. I think we'll see more of that, these mid-major programs kind of, and like these mid-major programs kind of like coming up and having these players excel.
Yeah, a lot of changes, and it's funny because whenever, listen, I am a huge basketball fan, and I grew up in the college game, and just here in Arkansas, I just go back, like I said, to Nolan Richardson and Corliss Williamson, Todd Day, and Lee Mayberry. I mean, they're the teams I grew up on and I gravitated towards. So just hearing you speak even about Arkansas State and about 2025, it gets me excited because I just love how the game has expanded on so many different levels. So I'll get you out of here on this, and it's just a general question I like, because obviously, your accolades speak for itself. Your journey speaks for itself. And I love when somebody has followed their passion and made it into a career. If there's somebody right out there listening right now and saying, man, I just want to be a sports reporter when I grow up. I want to cover sports, especially like you said, man, you're a male dominant industry and what's finally changing. If you're a young woman right now and you're sitting in 8th grade and you're saying, man, I just want to cover a sports team. What do you say to them about you can do it? Look at me. You could do it. This is what you need to do.
Yeah. Oh, first off, making a correction. It was Little Rock lost to Morehead State, not Murray State. Got it.
That's okay. Hey, listen, you had the M. We had the M's, right?
So getting back to your original question, honestly, it's not really an easy field to break into. You have to really, really love covering the sports, and like emphasis on the really. You can't really do it because, I want to be on TV and I want to go to the games and all that stuff, because that stuff gets old eventually, the being on TV part, and you have to really love it. And there's a lot of times where, you're out in the cold or you move to some random state that you don't know anyone in, and not the pay isn't the best always. And so it's just really important to know that, hey, these are the steps I have to take in order to get to where I want. And it's only temporary, and it's important to kind of just embrace the process, or what is it? Joel Embiid says, trust the process.
I like that. You throw an Embiid reference in there. We love it.
Yeah. He actually went to high school in Gainesville, Florida. So
that's right. Okay.
Yeah, at the Rock. Yeah. So anyways, you just have to kind of trust that process and understand that, everything isn't going to last forever if you're kind of in a rough spot, but also it's important to meet the people that you're around and make friends or make connections with those people in those small towns, because they really appreciate the coverage that you're giving them. And it's also important to never burn bridges with anybody. This industry that's probably my biggest advice. Never burn bridges with anybody, because this industry is so incredibly small. And like, I'll give you a quick example. So when I had my first gig in Gainesville, my first TV job, and I was going to intern at the station before I got hired there. And I was still in school at the time. And I also had a part-time job because, I was in college.
Yep.
And I was like, hey, like, I'd like to intern here, like, da-da-da-da. So I had an interview with the sports director. And it went well and everything. They're like, okay, we need you to do this. And then I gave him kind of a 2 weeks notice. I'm like, hey, like, I can't come this Friday. And also, like, I can't come every Friday, but I can try to make something work. And then for whatever reason, that just set him off the edge. And I gave him like 2 weeks notice on this. So I feel like it was time. And I wasn't being paid anyways. And so he was like, this really puts us in a bind. Like, I can't believe you would do this. This is so unprofessional. You would never be a good fit for our station. I can't believe you would do this. Like, don't ever talk to me or anybody at this station ever again. And my friend had worked there, and timing is so interesting because he somehow opened that email, was like open on his computer, and he was like, what the heck is this? And so he showed his boss, and then so my boss former boss, I guess, but he wasn't my boss yet, took note of that. And then later that week, that angry sports director cursed on air, and he got fired for cursing on air literally like a week after that email was sent. So it just shows that everything kind of comes back around. And I end up working at that station that he told me to never talk to again. So it just shows that never burn bridges with anybody, because you never know, like someone might snub you or whatever, but then later down the line, you could get a really great position and they might be asking for a job at your outlet or station or whatever. So it's just so important to just treat everyone with kindness, because you also never know what anyone's going through. And also you just never know where people are going to end up.
I'm just mentally taking points from that, because there's so many. I mean, you talked about, one of the biggest things you said was it's only temporary. But embrace it, right? Embrace it. It's only temporary. I speak about relationships all the time, whether it be kids that I mentor or, even myself. Like, don't burn the bridges. As frustrated as you can be, you just never know. Just kill them with kindness. I said all the time, just kill them with kindness. You could be professional about it. And at the end of the day, people remember that. They really, really do. So I think that's great points for the audience. Again, Cierra Clark at Cierra Clark TV on X, on Twitter. Like I said, sports anchor reporter from THV 11 in Little Rock, Arkansas, covering all things sports for them, which I love. Cierra, thank you so much on behalf of the Blue Coats, on behalf of Heat Ratio Sports, myself and my co-host Joe Richmond, who couldn't be here today. We thank you so much for taking the time and giving us a lot of this gold, I would say, from an interview.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to meet you guys.
Absolutely. I keep tearing it up. We appreciate it.